The city of Rockville reveres its roots and relies on their mayor and council to lead the city. Each of the former mayors we spoke to has different philosophies of how to lead a city, but one common bond is their love of Rockville.
Jim Coyle served as a council member and then as mayor in the early 90s. His background as a former city manager helped him to lead the city in dealing with development and downtown issues. We met with the former mayor in Courthouse Square.
Well, Jim, thanks for joining us for this special segment that we're covering the former mayors of Rockville. And it's such a nice day out here. Does this area have any particular significance to you in terms of this fountain?
Well, as I told you earlier, we spent a long time debating what she was going to hold. The Cultural Arts Commission, was the one that oversaw the ideas and everything. But we literally spent, after we agreed to what we wanted, I think we spent 2 years before we could get to a final decision. She would hold a globe. And I don't know if that's the Declaration of Independence. I've forgotten what the scroll is that she's holding, but it's a great statue. I really love what we did with this courthouse area. But it took many years to come to a conclusion because there's so many people in Rockville who had memories of this area, particularly when the street went all the way through. So we wanted to do the right thing in this location. I think this fountain has turned out to be just perfect for this spot.
Can you give us some background on, during your time on the council and as mayor, what this area looked like? Town center was starting to come into play in a big way?
If you can picture, right at this corner is where the mall ended. And then the rest of that whole area was the mall. There was a set of steps and everything that went up into the mall. And it was pretty foreboding because when you drove in, you had nowhere to go other than go back out the other side. And as I think I told you, we tried to retrofit the mall with Eisen's Kilbane. It worked for a couple years, and then there just wasn't enough support because the parking lot, as you probably have heard the stories, was so dark and foreboding that people didn't want to go into it. And the city owned it, and it was very expensive to knock it down.
Why did you decide to run for public office in the city of Rockville?
Oh, it's a long story. I've always been involved in politics from the time I was a young kid. My parents were old Baltimore ward politics people, and during elections they would drag us to the polls or take us out campaigning or whatever. So I always had an interest. I got my bachelor's degree in government and politics, and I was never in a position to run for office because of my professional work. But after we moved to Rockville, I was in a position I could do that, and I decided that that was a good way to contribute to the community. So I was active on the Human Rights Commission and some other things, and then in '85 ran for the mayor and council.
How would you describe your time as mayor? Did it go well, or how was it different from being a council member?
I think it was an interesting time. It was a transition period, really. We had made a number of major decisions during Doug's term as mayor. He was mayor for 6 years. We'd done most of the negotiating on what town center was going to look like. We had redeveloped the Rockville Pike plan. We had gotten into the discussion about King Farm and Thomas Farm. There were a lot of developmental issues that were going on. One of the things you asked about my fondest memories, was we ran as a team in those days. And we ran with Doug as a team first, and then when I ran, and then Rose continued the team concept. So when we ran together, we all basically agreed on what we thought was best for the city. We had our differences, but we kind of put the petty differences aside and really worked on the big issues. And I think we accomplished a lot. It was an exciting time. I wish I had served a second term to see some more things done, but I'd served 10 years, and you really get to the point where you feel like it's time for new leadership. And Rose picked right up, and things continued on. And so I was really pleased with what I was able to get done in that period of time.
What were some of your accomplishments?
The comprehensive development plans for Thomas and King Farm, that was very important to us. And now to see how they've been developed is a good feeling. The issue of the compensation for mayor and council had been hanging over us for a long time. There was no process for looking at the compensation, and it became a political football. So when I was mayor, we proposed a citizen-based compensation commission to look at this and try to take the politics out of it. And I think that's worked pretty well. There have been occasions where the politics have slipped back into it, but it's been a good thing to have this citizen group looking at the stipends for the mayor and council. And recently I was appointed to it, and I've been pleased to serve on that for the last couple of years. So I think that was a very good step that I was pleased with.
Well, Jim, a question on that. With Rockville's form of government, with the council manager form of government, they're part-time positions for the mayor and council, but it's a lot of time that goes into those jobs. Your thoughts on how that's going, or how it was when you were council member and then mayor, and then how it's going now?
Well, my background is urban management. I have been a city manager, and I worked for the International City County Managers Association for a couple of years. So my orientation is towards the city county manager form of government. And Rockville is a great example of what a good council manager form of government is. And the city has worked very hard to protect the form of government we've had on several, charter revision groups that have looked at this. Overwhelmingly come back and say, we really want to keep a part-time mayor and council and a full-time professional staff, because we're a corporate model of governance. That's really what we are. The mayor and council are a board of directors, and the manager is the CEO.
Do you have any advice for going into this election season for any of the candidates that might be running?
Well, first thing I'd like to see have happen is that we have teams running for mayor and council again. For some reason, a couple of the people running for mayor and council back several elections ago said that this was a bad thing for the city. Historically, from the time the city started the council manager form of government up to about the end of Rose's term, we had 2 teams of candidates running for office. We even had conventions where you selected the people to run, and you had an agenda, a platform that people put forward to the citizens. Well, we've lost all that. So people run now as individuals. They may well have good ideas, but if you don't have a group of people who have similar orientation, you can run into serious problems getting policy issues discussed. And we've seen some of that over the past several years, where the mayor and council haven't been able to come together. So my first recommendation is that we start seeing some teams running again with a specific platform and goals that they want to achieve for the next 2 years. The one thing I think that hurt the citizen participation in Rockville was when we went to the county registration rolls for our voter registration. You may not know this, but for years the city maintained its own city elections. And what that did was all the candidates, when they knocked on doors, not only argued for their positions and their support, they asked people if they were registered to vote. And we used to register at least another 20 or 25% every election. And then we would follow up and get those people out to vote. And I think in one election, I think it was the second time I ran for council, Doug was running for first term as mayor. I think that was the highest turnout we had. We had something like 11,000 people voted. It was the highest percentage, I think, of the city voted.
Can you talk a little bit about your Coyleisms?
Yeah. The first time I was running for council in '85, we had 3 candidates for mayor and 11 candidates running for the 4 council seats. We had 3 full slates of people running. There was the IFR, the Alliance of Rockville Citizens, and then an independent slate had gotten organized. So we had, it was unbelievable the number of people running, all qualified individuals. So I met with Davis Kennedy, who used to be the Gazette editor, and I said, what's the best way to try to get known in the city of Rockville? He said, well, you have a great sense of humor. Why don't you run some ads in the paper? So we came up with the campaign Coyleism idea, and I ran ads every week in the Gazette with a different statement on it relative to the campaign. And the fun part about it was that people would come up to me and ask me what was my campaign Coyleism going to be this year.
Could you talk a little bit about some of your more challenging moments as mayor?
There were a lot of serious times, but the one that stuck out the most for me when you asked that question was we were looking at building a city ice rink, and the staff had done a feasibility study and came up with a number of sites, one of which is where it is now over near the golf course off Goody Drive. But the first choice of the staff was behind the swim center because they felt that would be a better collection area for all the different types of things that were happening. So we suggested to the staff that they hold a public hearing and get the input. That evening we had a previous meeting, an earlier meeting, and so we didn't get to the hearing until later, and we were in the back of the room. Well, unfortunately, the hearing really got out of control. At one point, it got to people identifying what neighborhood we were from, and people started shouting epithets at each other about their neighborhood and why they were there, and it was pretty ugly. So I had to walk up to the front of the room and take over the microphone and calm the folks down and let them know that nothing had been decided. But it was about the most difficult meeting I think I've ever seen. I really coined a term after that, and I don't know if anybody's used it, but I called it flashpoint democracy. And you saw it during the public hearings nationally on the health care. You get a group of reasonable people together and someone starts this ugly rhetoric, and before you know it, it just explodes into a really ugly scenario.
Any plans in the future, Jim, for public office again?
No. I did this for 10 years. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I owe the citizens of Rockville a great debt for allowing me to do it. And that's really, I think, how most people look at their service here. It's really a privilege to serve the citizens of Rockville.
What is your hope for Rockville, Jim, as we look towards the future?
There's an old farming proverb that says, the footprint of the owner is the best manure. And what I want to see is more footprints of Rockville residents all over the city in terms of service, in terms of participation in our hearings, participation in community events. That's the ingredient of democracy that makes us as strong as we are.
Rockville is interesting in a lot of ways, but we just launched this new branding campaign, and part of the consultant's job was to do some market research, and they came back to us and said, okay, well, you have this dynamic going on. You have the hometown versus world class. You have the neighborhoods are still there, but yet you have this booming technology corridor. Do you think that's a hard balance as the governing body for the mayor and council to kind of keep in perspective?
Yes, if I could digress a little bit on this, I testified before the Planning Commission on the new Rockville Pike plan, and I'm not in favor of it. And the reason is, when I was on the council, we downzoned Rockville Pike in 1989 because, and I think we downzoned it 2/3 because we wanted to maintain the Pike as a retail mecca, not a commercial building zone like Crystal City and others. In fact, I've used that analogy. So my concern is that what's the purpose of a local economy? That's a question I would like the mayor and council to be asking. What's the purpose of a local economy? It's to meet the needs of those people who live in your economy, in your community. Well, if you look at any of the barometers of what a successful local economy is, Rockville exceeds that by measures of 4 and 5, 6 times. We have 4 or 5 jobs for every numerical resident of the city of Rockville. We have every kind of retail, restaurants, commercial establishments. You go down the list. And there's a balance point, a tipping point that you have to reach. And I'm afraid we have already moved across that tipping point. The pendulum is on the other side. There's some old master planning concepts about if you exceed 50% of your land use for other than residential, you're at a dangerous point. Or if more than 50% of your real estate taxes come from commercial endeavors rather than residential occupancies, you've reached a critical point. Well, I think in Rockville, we are at a critical point. And we have got to start to think about the preservation of Rockville as a residential community. And we can say no. If we don't want development, we say no. That's not what's going to help this community. We want more of this, we want more of that. At some point, you want to reach a stasis, a balance that says this is what we want to preserve going forward. And that means saying no to outside people who want to simply come in and develop your land. We have a right to protect the citizens' interest in what comes into the city of Rockville.
So what would you recommend in the case of Rockville's Pike? It needs help, obviously, in terms of traffic and congestion.
Well, there's the old thing, you know, the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. Well, the devil we know, most people like. People like Rockville Pike. They don't like the traffic, but they understand that if we try to deal with the traffic, we may destroy the golden goose that we have there. So I think the plan that's in place allows development. It actually calls for many of the same amenity kinds of things that they're talking about. The parallel roads, better architecture, whatever. The city has already recaptured some of the roadway there as we've gone forward. The difference is the density of the development and the uses that you allow. If we move in the direction of intense commercial and retail development, we will destroy the kind of retail context of Rockville Pike, and then eventually that's just going to be a major thoroughfare like Route 1 through Arlington and Crystal City. So we have to live with the devil we know and make the marginal improvements necessary to keep it evolving into a low-dense retail, restaurant, friendly shopper kind of mecca. That's how I look at it. And there's a certain spirit in Rockville that you don't find in a lot of other places. But you got to nurture that spirit, and that's what I think this whole debate has to be, not about buildings and streets and roads, but how are we going to keep the same community spirit in Rockville as we go forward? And a lot of these issues will determine that, because they will affect the character of neighborhoods and people's attitudes about the city. So it's just a great place to live, and we want to keep it a secret as much as possible so that we don't get overwhelmed. But I really believe that's the best thing that we have going in the city of Rockville.
Rose Krasnow served as mayor of Rockville from 1995 until 2001, the first elected, longest-serving female mayor in Rockville's history. Krasnow was able to use her strategic planning skills to lead the city for 3 terms as mayor.
Rose, thank you so much for joining us for this segment.
Happy to be here.
And we wanted to check in with you. Since you left as mayor of Rockville, what have you been up to?
Well, you know, I actually went through a couple of jobs when I first left before I landed where I am now. I spent about 18 months working with the National Governors Association as a policy analyst in the smart growth area. And then I became head of the Montgomery County United Way. That was a different little twist. And after that, I took a job with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. I've been there about 6.5 years now.
And Rose, how does it feel to be the longest serving female mayor of Rockville?
Feels great, actually. I really was excited to be the first woman elected mayor. Vi Hosepian, of course, had been appointed mayor. But it was exciting that, given the long history of Rockville, that we finally elected a woman. I was more than happy to serve 3 terms. It was really the best part of my adult life.
How would you describe your tenure as mayor? 3 terms, what was going on in the city at that time?
Well, I always say I was very fortunate. I happened to serve at a time where the economy was strong. When I served 2 terms on the city council before I ran for mayor. That was in the early 90s. And at that time, the economy wasn't so good. We actually were laying some people off from City Hall, and it was tough. And then just about the time I became mayor, things really started picking up. And what that meant was we had the resources to do a lot of really exciting projects. And so I felt that I was able to get a lot accomplished in my 6 years.
Could you describe some of your accomplishments that you're most proud of?
Oh, wow. There's a list. I'm happy to say. I mean, one of the things that I obviously was most excited about was being involved in the whole redevelopment of downtown. That was something that actually first got started, I would say, under Doug Duncan when he was still mayor. But we really were able to do a lot when I was mayor. We opened the movie theaters, and that was something that Rockville had really wanted ever since the old theaters had closed. And of course, they're still doing a great business today, so that's very exciting. And even the idea for the rest of, what I worked on primarily was the area where the movie theaters are and where economic development for the county is now located, that whole area. But we had just gotten into designing the area across the street where you now have the whole town center And we knew that we needed it. We always said Rockville was a city with a hole in the middle, because we didn't have a place for Rockville's residents to really go and hang out in the city. So I'm very proud that I helped make all of that happen. Obviously was also very happy that we approved the King Farm in Falls Grove under my watch. And when King Farm came along, it was really the first in that type of plan that we had seen. The Kentlands was similar up in Gaithersburg, but we hadn't seen anything like the King Farm here. But because it was an undeveloped piece of land, people were not too concerned about it. By the time we started to approve Falls Grove and people had seen how fast the King Farm was coming about, they were a little more worried. But it was a great plan. We'd actually learned a lot from doing the King Farm, and I was even more excited about Falls Grove. So I was very happy when we got that approved as well. I always enjoyed, one of my victories in downtown Rockville, of course, was getting the funding for the Rockville Library. That was something that we had worked for a long time, and we were very surprised, in fact, when it wasn't in the county executive's budget. We had been promised it would be, and all of us had just assumed that it therefore would be. And it was actually the citizens of Rockville who called me up and said, it's not there. In other words, I wasn't contacted and warned that it wasn't going to be there. And they asked me if I would head the fight to help get that funding put back in the budget by the county council. And we really had to do an all-whole, no-holds-bar conversation, and really had to work hard, and we did get that funding put back in, and I think it's really one of the highlights today, so that's nice. Other things that I thought were accomplishments, I created the Rockville Economic Development Corporation. The county traditionally was not directing people toward Rockville when they had businesses that were interested in coming in, and that was very frustrating to me. We almost lost one of our biggest businesses because we didn't even know they were looking elsewhere, and we just happened to schedule kind of a visit to see them, a thank you for being in Rockville visit. That's when they told us they were actually planning to leave. So it was things like that that really encouraged us to create the Economic Development Corporation, and I think it really made a difference for the city. And I also really, one of my pet joys was I was the liaison for the mayor and council to the Rockville Caregivers Coalition. And you know, we have a lot of wonderful organizations in this city who help those who we don't see frequently in front of the mayor and council, who aren't here regularly saying, no, you can't do this, but they have great needs. And working with that group and supporting them was very rewarding to me personally.
How does it make you feel to see Town Square now with the kind of the crown jewel of the library being there, and it seems to always be bustling? How does it make you feel?
It makes me feel proud. It really does. I had a friend in recently from Connecticut, and she hadn't been here for a while, so I took her down to see it, and it was like showing off the child that you're proud of. It really was. It was great to see it happen, to know that even despite the economy, I think it's been very successful. I talk to a lot of people all the time who really enjoy the fact that they don't have to go far to go to restaurants, to have a happening sort of place. And what people forget is that we really took a lot of criticism when we started talking about taking down the old shopping center where Magruder's used to be. People thought we had lost our minds, and I kept telling them, just wait, you're gonna like it when it happens. People have a hard time understanding change before they actually see it. And of course, once it actually opened up, I think people have just been thrilled with it, and that's nice.
Any advice for any candidates that are thinking about running, or for the current council right now?
Well, running for office, I mean, my frustration with running for office in Rockville is that the elections were every 2 years. Because the real way to run for office is to get out there and knock on doors. It's a wonderful way to meet citizens. It's a wonderful way to find out what the issues are. And they say if you knocked on every door, you would absolutely win. And goodness knows I tried to knock on as many doors as I could, and could recount funny stories to you that happened as I was door knocking. So I always think that's a good idea. I also think it's very important to have an idea of why you think you should be elected, what it is you're trying to make happen. One of the things that I did when I became mayor was I started a visioning process called Imagine Rockville. And it was more because I was trying to come up with a strategic direction for the city. And we pulled in first we had a steering committee that I always said was the best steering committee I possibly could have appointed. They were tremendously helpful. It was a very diverse group of citizens, and it was just so much fun to work with them. Then we ended up hiring a great consultant too, and the process just couldn't have been better. And a lot of the things that I worked on in my 6 years as mayor all came about as a result of Imagine Rockville. And so again, having that goal, what are you trying to accomplish, I think really is helpful. Interestingly enough, when I ran, I always ran on a slate. A lot of people did not like the slate concept. We endorsed a team of 4 people for council and 1 person for mayor. And I understood why people didn't like it. We were hard to run against once we got on, but at the same time, we also worked so cooperatively when we did get elected. And we didn't always get everyone on. One of my best friends on the council was someone who had not run with us on the slate, so it wasn't a complete roadblock to getting elected, but I did think it really helped kind of smooth some of the workings of government, the fact that we had all kind of run with a similar goal in mind, and were able to talk things out when we had our differences and really come to agreement so that we could move the city forward as opposed to spending a lot of time bickering about the direction we wanted to go in.
Other mayors that we've talked to for this program have echoed the same
really?
same sentiment, and also because the term limits are so short, so you don't have much time to make a difference.
2 years is very short,
yeah.
And you really. I used to say I juggled a lot of balls when I was mayor because I had another job. I had young children. I was the mayor. I always said I was pretty good at keeping it all together until it was election time again, and then all the balls would start falling down. So it got a little tough. And of course, we've tried to get 4-year elections in, and I do think it would be an advantage. In fact, I think it would be an advantage to have staggered 4-year terms so that you're not possibly facing the option of having everyone be new all at once, which I think would be hard. But we've never managed to get it past the voters of Rockville. We've put it up for referendum on several occasions, and it's never gone very far. So,
going back to something you said about being strategic with your plans and your visioning, I imagine that people. It's hard. Change is hard for people, especially. I feel like in this area, you get used to a certain way of doing things, where your shops are, where the way you live your life, and for you to go through and say, hey, we have a better idea for how things could be better for that hole in the ground in the center of town. I mean, I imagine that was tough. I mean, you faced a lot of criticism.
Well, we faced a lot of criticism on almost any project we introduced, so you got used to that. I always remember on the building on 11 North Washington Street, when it was under construction, someone called me up and said, how dare you put in a building without sidewalks? And I said, we're going to have sidewalks. But because it was still all behind construction fencing, they just didn't see a sidewalk, therefore they assumed there wasn't going to be one. I got a petition when the Board of Ed was talking about doing something to their site. They hadn't shown us a plan. They really hadn't come forward with anything specific, but they had a lot of extra ground there, and they announced that they were going to look at possibly redeveloping that property. I got a petition with over 1,000 signatures saying, we don't want it. They didn't know what it was. They just didn't want it. So you got kind of used to working around that, and usually we could, I think, convince enough people. They always knew, I think, that I was listening to what they were saying, because I've always prided myself on listening to their objections and trying to answer them in a way that they would understand that we're not going off in some crazy direction. I thought, to me, one of my biggest disappointments actually was we actually tried to get an expansion and a renovation to City Hall. It had really gotten too small, and we had a beautiful plan drawn up, and it would have actually had the entrance here on Maryland Avenue, and we knew the courthouse was coming in, and we didn't want to be overshadowed by it, and it would have had much better handicapped accessibility, would have ensured that we could fit in all the departments. I'm a big believer in having all the departments in one building, I must say. And for whatever reason, people really objected to the idea that we would spend their tax dollars on a city hall, and I never was able to get enough votes to make that one happen. And I still think it's a loss, and now we are seeing departments going into different buildings. And so you have some victories, and you have some areas where you don't succeed, and you just take it all in stride and keep moving ahead.
Can you comment, Rose, on the city's role when it comes to dealing with the county, specifically about the school system? Right now, I don't know how much you've been following, but facing the overcrowding with schools, and can you comment at all about what's going on or your thoughts on the situation?
Well, I must admit, we didn't really have many arguments with the school system when I was mayor, and we did have overcrowded schools then too. I think the county is trying to do the best with the resources it has. I have always felt, or have been lucky in a way, to be the mayor and council of a city that doesn't have to provide schools. That is tough. Dealing with all the school issues is tough. Yes, I know we've had portables, et cetera, but so have other schools in the county. And I've been surprised that the issue has escalated as much as it has. Of course, part of that is we didn't have an adequate public facilities ordinance when I was the mayor. I still never felt that we approved plans without making sure that the facilities were in fact adequate. And even with the county has an obligation to educate every child. We have one of the best school systems in the country, without a doubt. So that while I understand wanting to make sure that our facilities are as good as any other facilities in the county, I've been a little surprised at how heated this argument has become.
What is your hope for Rockville as we look towards the future?
That it doesn't lose its wonderful family character. You've probably heard that from everybody, but like I say, I bought my house here in 1980. I moved here from out of town, had wanted to live in a place that wasn't just a bedroom suburb. And one of the things I've always liked about Rockville is that it has a history, and a great history. And going back to Revolutionary War times, which I thought was great, it has beautiful older neighborhoods. And I think that the people who live here really feel that we provide a level of service that exceeds that of the rest of the county. And so I've never really heard people complain that they've had to pay extra taxes here in the city of Rockville. So we used to have that cliche statement, it's a great place to live, work, and play, but the fact of the matter is it always has been. And I really hope as we grow, and we will, and as the whole metropolitan area grows, which causes impacts on us here, that we're able to maintain that family-friendly and business-friendly feel, that we're a little special, because we are.
Larry Giammo first served as a planning commissioner for the city of Rockville. He then made a run for mayor in 2001. After being elected, phase 1 of the redevelopment of Town Center happened under his watch, and we had the chance to sit down with him in Town Square.
Larry, thanks for joining us for this special segment. We appreciate you making time for us.
Happy to be here.
And how does it feel to be here in the Town Square Plaza?
It's really fantastic. I mean, it's been great to see how this space has been increasingly used over the last few years, and in ways that we were very much hoping. People coming with their families, with their friends, hanging out, spending time, being part of the community. It's been neat to see those numbers that people increase too over the last few years, as more and more people become aware of what's here, and is really a draw for them. The one thing has been a little bit unfortunate over the last few years is just obviously the deep recession that we found ourselves in. And that's obviously had some impact on the businesses, the shops, the restaurants here. But I think what's really going to be exciting is at some point, obviously, we're going to pull out of this recession, and this place will become even more vibrant, more people coming, more people wanting to be part of the community. And then even more exciting beyond that, over the next few years, presumably this will become the catalyst for further redevelopment in Town Center. Same kind of high quality of what we got here, just to the north, just to the south, around the metro station. 5 to 10 years from now, Rockville's Town Center could be an even more magnificent place than it's turned out to be.
For so many years, Rockville's downtown kind of plagued the mayor and council. What to do with the space? The Rockville Mall was a failure. How does it feel that during your tenure as mayor, you were able to do something with this space and make it into a successful project.
Well, it's nice to be able to see it, finally, I think, get on the right track. As you mentioned, there's 40 years of struggle here with the failing town, Main Street back in the 1950s and 60s, the urban renewal that wiped everything clean from here, the Rockville Mall, which kind of failed from the day that it opened, fits and starts trying to make that work. And when I campaigned for office in 2001, when I ran the first time, my top priority was trying to make something happen in town center in a more substantial way than what had been achieved previously. So in a span of, I was mayor for 6 years, but in the span of 5 of those 6 years, we went from an aspiration to actually getting this done. And it's something I think, not just for me to be proud of, but I think the entire Rockville community, the other levels of government who are partners in this project. I mean, it was the ideal, I think, private-public partnership that we formed with the other 3 levels of government, the developers who were involved in this, all the folks in the Rockville community that took part in making this happen. So I think it's something we can all be really proud of.
You were a planning commissioner before you became mayor. Why decide to run for mayor? What was part of that decision?
Yeah, I served for 5 years on the Rockville Planning Commission, and I'm really glad that I did that before deciding to run for mayor, primarily because of what I learned as a planning commissioner. I learned a lot about the city, and there is a lot to learn about the city. It's 60,000 people, it's not a very big area, but a lot of rich history, a lot of diversity, a lot of differences from neighborhood to neighborhood. So I became aware of all that. But I also gained a really deep understanding of land use law, planning, approval processes. The land use authority that the city of Rockville has is to be treasured by the city, because it is a fairly rare thing in the state of Maryland for a municipality to have land use authority. So we have control over our own destiny in terms of what's built, what's not built, and for what is built to make sure that it's a real asset for our community, because too much of what's built in the DC metro area you kind of look at and you think, this really is not an asset to the community in which it's been built. So all of that understanding really helped me, I think, be a much more effective mayor in dealing with the land use issues and dealing with the redevelopment of town center. So I think that was really helpful for me.
How would you describe your tenure as mayor? We have a council manager form of government, but I think maybe some people might describe you as you were a strong mayor. I mean, you got things done. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, technically, legally, obviously, the mayor is a peer among equals on the council. You got 4 council members and the mayor. And from a policy-making standpoint, from a legislative standpoint, all completely equal. But I think people look at the mayor with an expectation that they're going to provide a certain level of leadership in terms of making sure that there's a vision that's compelling, that people are excited about, that's really an aspiration for the community, and going to rally the support on the council and the community to make that vision a reality. I think there's other things that come with being a mayor as well that, again, it's not written in the charter, but I think is expected of the mayor, and I think really required of the mayor. For instance, being the city's chief lobbyist. I spent a lot of time down in Annapolis, and not only involved with the Maryland Municipal League, but working directly with legislators, the governor, and others down in Annapolis on issues that really matter to Rockville. And like during the legislative session, there were some weeks I would literally spend the entire week down in Annapolis, basically working the legislature, working the executive branch. But it's also the relationships with our federal officials, our 2 Maryland senators, our representative in Congress. You got the county council obviously right here, building relationships with them and the county executive. And so essentially being the city's chief lobbyist. And there's really a lot to that. And there's a lot that has to happen in that regard in order for the city to accomplish its goals. For instance, this town center project would not have happened without the direct involvement of the other 3 levels of government. And there's other things that I think people expect the mayor to, maybe it's kind of more of a figurehead kind of thing, but the community events, the ceremonies, the parades, and those are all really important things and things that I took very, very seriously, because you're representing the city, you're representing the city's vision, and it's an opportunity to kind of stay in touch with folks and talk about the vision for the city and where things are going to go. So it's more than is what's written on paper, I guess, the role of mayor. And my thought was, I'm going to do everything I can in my power on behalf of the city and its residents to help make the city a better community.
Was there anything surprising when you were mayor that you learned about the citizens of Rockville or about the city, just in your interactions, or anything that surprised you?
I don't know that anything particularly surprised me, but I think my appreciation for the diversity in the city increased dramatically. And that began right from the get-go when I launched my campaign, my initial campaign for mayor back in '01. I knocked on several thousand doors, talked to a lot of people. That's one of the neat things about running for public office is you basically have license to knock on the doors of or approach total strangers and ask them what they think. And I took advantage of that opportunity. But in that, I heard from and talked to so many different people, different backgrounds, different ages, different neighborhoods, different income levels, different everything. And it really gave me an appreciation for how wonderfully diverse Rockville is. And that appreciation only increased as mayor. A lot of people don't know the stats. It's obviously out there from the Census Department, but more than 1/3 of Rockville's residents were born outside the United States. It's truly an international community. And in many ways it reflects where the global economy is going today, where the world is going today, with people moving from place to place. And so I think in many ways this is kind of a harbinger of what's to come in many places around the globe. And so we have the opportunity to benefit from not just the diversity of the way people traditionally think about it in terms of race or ethnicity, but diversity in terms of people just coming from countries like literally everywhere in the world.
Larry, what's your hope for Rockville as we look towards the future?
It's a difficult balancing act that we, as a community, I think, face. In that, as we were talking about earlier, more people want to come to this area, not just Rockville. Part of it's because of the federal government, and part of it's the quality of life, part of it's the other businesses and the economy here. So people want to come to this area, and that's potentially a good thing. But at the same time, as a community, it can put a real stress on the community. So I think one of the advantages of living in Rockville is like, I'm a Rockville resident. I'm a part of the Rockville community. I've got a Rockville city government there who presumably is going to look out for me in ways that the county government or state government won't. So there's always that danger that as more people come, and as essentially the boundaries, Rockville's boundaries become even less distinct from the suburbs that surround us, that we might lose that sense of community. So I think that's going to be a bit of a challenge for us moving forward. Perhaps the biggest challenge that we have. A part of that, and maybe if I can kind of tangentially move to something else, is also, I think part of our sense of community is our appreciation for the history that we have here too. We've lost a lot of the icons of our history over the last 50 to 75 years, unfortunately. The most recent, most notable was when Chestnut Lodge, burned down a couple of years ago. We could talk about that as well, but we're losing those. And I think the city government, it's incumbent on the city government to try to do whatever it can to keep people aware of the history. And not just the icons, certain buildings, that kind of stuff, although they are, really good prompts for, when you see a house that was built in the 1920s, to think about what was Rockville really like in the 1920s, and obviously very different than it is today. But there's other elements of our history too that we shouldn't forget, even if they're painful memories. Segregation was very much a part of Rockville up through the 1960s. And that too was something I really gained an appreciation for running for mayor and serving as mayor, to talk with Rockville residents who were African American, who were segregated against essentially, and to hear their painful memories and how hard it was for them, and the transition, the turmoil that to some degree even happened here in the community as the country moved beyond segregation. Those are things that we can't forget because they are, part of what we've become as a community. So, I hope that as the city moves forward into the future and becomes this wonderful place to, with a wonderful town center and all these other wonderful things, that we don't lose touch with the rich history that we've had going back, 250 years.
Did you have a special guest you wanted to introduce?
I do. Hey Ben, why don't you come on over?
Who's this?
You want to introduce yourself?
Ben.
This is Bennett, my son. He's 6. He's in kindergarten at Bell Elementary School. And he's got an older sister, Ella, who's 9, in 3rd grade, also at Bell Elementary School. That was another interesting part of being mayor because Ella was born just a few months after I was first elected, and Ben was born 3 years later. So I had the opportunity to be mayor and help raise our new family at the same time. So one of the things that a lot of people have asked me about is, what was it like for Ben and Ella, not so much while I was mayor, but what did they think when I stopped being mayor? And so I got a lot of questions from them about why I wasn't going to be mayor anymore, and I explained to them I decided not to run for a 4th term, was going to maybe move on to some other things. But then they said how happy they were that I'd be around a lot more, right, on the evenings and the weekends when the mayor's got to go do the mayor thing. But they were sad because they wouldn't be able to ride with me in the Memorial Day parade anymore. So, and Ella especially, because she was old enough to really, I think, appreciate and enjoy that. So, but it was nice having them born while I was mayor. Everybody in the community so welcoming of our children, and so in many ways our children had a much bigger family than just my wife Rebecca and I.
Any future plans for a run at public office, Larry?
Probably not, at least not planned anytime soon. I think there may come a time at some point in the future where there may be an opportunity where perhaps my leadership might be useful, and I'll be ready to maybe step back into the political arena. I've been involved in some stuff in the private sector over the last couple of years, which have been interesting, and I'm presently in the process of developing potentially a new business or two, which could turn out to be working on some really exciting things. A little early to talk about at the moment, but in some ways I kind of being a politician, I guess, is has its pluses and minuses, to put it simply. I mean, just to be able to be in the middle of the discussion of policy, which could have profound effect on the community well into the future. I think that, to me, and serving the community in other ways is too. Those are things that memories of doing that. I'm going to treasure that, regardless of whether I ever get back in politics. It comes with it's a lot of work though too. It's a lot of evenings, and a lot of weekends, and a lot to navigate, if you will, to try to do a really good job as an elected official. So I'll have to weigh all of that and weigh that with my wife Rebecca. At some point maybe, we'll see.
Susan Hoffman served as mayor of Rockville from 2007 to 2009. Since her time as mayor, Hoffman has continued to work for Montgomery County. We sat down with the former mayor in the 9/11 Memorial Park.
Well, this is the 9/11, September 11th Memorial Park, which was built by the county with the city. And it is one of the most lovely parks, I think, in the whole county. It's contemplative, it's all of those wonderful things. The public art is stunning, and I know that the city had a lot to do with working with the artists, as did the county. The brilliance for me is that the way they lined up the names on 9/11, on September 11th each year, the way the sun focuses, it goes down the names. It's just, it's so touching and exquisite and perfect. I can't imagine any other city having as good or better, I'll say better, a monument. It's a great work of art. I think the thing that always springs to mind as my fondest memories over the time were during the Mayor for a Day contest, which was run by the Maryland Municipal League, and it was done all over the state by mayors. But we were very proactive with ours, and we worked with all of the 4th grades in the city. So any school, public or private, that wanted to participate, they would be asked to write a composition, and then I would come out and meet with each of the classes. And that was, without question, the high spot of what I did. It was wonderful talking to the young folks and finding out their conceptions and often hilarious misconceptions of what being mayor of Rockville is, including, do you have security? Do you have a limousine? You know, expecting me to compete with the president for all of those perks. And it was always so charming, and they were very bright, and we have some wonderful young people, and it was a great experience for me.
You served on the council for a while before you became mayor. Was there a big change in your role, in your responsibilities? Anything surprising once you became mayor that you weren't expecting?
Much more demand on my time. People, while the mayor in Rockville is really a part of the council and convenes the meetings and runs the meetings, and but doesn't have a whole heck of a lot more power, more's the pity, than the council members, which a lot of people don't understand. So thinking that as the mayor, that I'm more the executive and that I have much more power. And but people wanted to see the mayor. No offense to the council members, certainly, but the interest was having the mayor attend things and be there and speak and so forth. So that was an interesting, I'm not so sure that, I guess I was a little surprised by it, but it made perfect sense. So that was kind of interesting. And so working a full-time job, it was pretty demanding. I liked it though, I'm not complaining. It was wonderful work, and it was fun. It was a great experience. You asked about challenges. Certainly there were challenges. I think the first vote after my election was the first time we met, was a vote on trash, which we had been trying to move from 2 times a week to once a week, which would be a huge saving, and turned out that we were successful. So we experienced a great savings for the city, and there has been no ill effects, but there were a number of people on the council who didn't quite see it that way. So that was part of when I was campaigning, that was certainly an issue that was at the front of people's minds. And most of the voters, as I campaigned, seemed to get that it would be a fine idea, and that most of the rest of the United States was doing once a week, and seemed to be surviving perfectly well. So that was a great accomplishment, and it had been a challenge and kind of perplexing, but we got through that one. And one of my disappointments was on the issue of affordable housing. I think a lot of people talk about affordable housing and wanting it. So when the time came to actually put your money where your mouth is, there was a particular community that would have been directly affected that was so vociferously in opposition, and really presented the issue, I think, in a false light by raising boogeymen of crime, and of course there was none of that. And this was really live-work housing. This was housing for our police and our librarians and our teachers. Certainly not, this was not Section 8 housing at all. So it was right on the edge of town center, which seemed to be the most perfect place for it. So that was a disappointment, and we still don't have that project. That still has not come to fruition, but I hope to live to see the day when we will have more affordable housing in Rockville, so that people's children can live here and people's grandchildren can live here, because that's really what we're talking about. Yeah.
Any plans, Susan, for a run at public office in the future?
I don't. I would never rule anything out. I think that's the rule. Don't ever say, never say never. But I don't, at this time, see anything in the future, but always interested in being helpful. I was just recently approached by the Governor O'Malley, to serve on a commission at the state level. I don't want to say what it is yet because we haven't had the final approval. But there are people who are interested in having me involved, so that's always very gratifying. Since leaving office, I have the time now, and I'm on 2 nonprofit boards, both doing social service work for one is Jubilee Foundation, which helps with housing for the developmentally disabled, and the other is the Jewish Social Service Agency, known as JESA, which is headquartered here in Rockville. So it gives me an opportunity to give back in another way and help them with their work. And I'm excited for the city. I hope that the relationship that we started with Jiaxing in China will continue to be firmed up and eventually become a sister city relationship. That's, I think, important. And maintaining, of course, the one with Pinneberg, which I was fortunate enough to visit 2 times, once while I was, no, actually both times when I was on the council. But they're a lovely group of people, and of course they visit here, and it's very nice. Yeah.
How do you want residents, people in the county, to remember your legacy as mayor?
Well, I know that I was always closely related to the arts and my support for the arts, and so I hope that will always be something that people think of, because I continue to do that in the private sector now and doing things privately and personally. So I think that the arts are as important to young people as sports, as the environmental activities, learning about the environment and how to improve it. I love the city. I cared a lot and still care, and will do whatever falls my way in terms of being called upon to help. I think that that going forward with the city, that's probably what I hope that the city will continue to do, is to look to its past and its rich history.